Welcome to the Jones Point Navigator series podcast, where we bring together thought leaders and companies at the crossroads of healthcare policy, markets, and innovation. Today's episode is with Amy Kelly, CEO of Miri, a startup that is focused on leveraging innovative AI technology to broaden access to health and wellness experts. We discussed building a company in the current wild west of healthcare and AI regulation, the responsible uses of AI in healthcare, and how Miri is including empathy and trust into its AI solution to expand access to health and wellness tools.
We really want people to feel like they can shine, to be their brightest. It felt really resonant, but there's an inner kind of secret meaning that I keep close to my heart, which is it means a bitter pill, which I think about as a system disruptor. And I find that the healthcare industry today is so transactional. People aren't getting access to what they need, and doctors and healthcare workers are so overworked and burnt out. This feels like something that can actually create connection instead of it being just transactional. AI can now form the relationship ties that both populations need to disrupt the system.
Since last November's release of ChatGPT, there has been an explosion of consumer awareness and optimism about the use of generative AI to improve healthcare and wellness. This development comes at a time when there's the interest in the wellness space is growing. According to McKinsey, it's a $1.5 trillion industry growing at 5 to 10%. So how do innovators and companies use these powerful tools to deliver on the promise and provide trusted health and wellness solutions? Well, our guest today is working on that very issue. And so we are thrilled to be joined by Amy Kelly, co-founder and CEO at Miri. Amy, welcome to the Jones Point Navigator Series podcast.
Thanks, Tommy. I'm excited to be here.
We're excited to have you. We usually like to start these with the segment called What's in a Name. Would love to hear about how you came to the name Miri, your inspiration for it, and what that means for the brand, and ultimately what you're trying to deliver for your customers.
So Miri, outwardly, it means the light or my light in different languages. And we really want people to feel like they can shine, to be their brightest. It felt really resonant, but there's an inner kind of secret meaning that I keep close to my heart, which is it means a bitter pill, which I think about as a system disruptor. And I find that the healthcare industry today is so transactional. People aren't getting access to what they need, and doctors and healthcare workers are so overworked and burnt out. This feels like something that can actually create connection instead of it being just transactional. AI can now form the relationship ties that both populations need to disrupt the system.
That's fantastic. And you touched on empathy and that relationship. And that's certainly something that I wanted to delve in a bit. I think you're right. As the healthcare system has changed and evolved, that relationship between doctor and patient has changed a lot. But ultimately, and I think some of the trust is eroded a bit. And so as you're building this product, a key element of getting someone to trust you and the experts you have and the bots to deliver is that trust and empathy. Like, how, when you're building this product and building the Gen AI, did you go about making sure that trust was paramount? Because as I said, as I told you, I've used the product, I really like it, and it's that empathy that comes across that is striking. So I would love to hear about how, as the CEO, you set to build that out.
So I've had a really interesting career in that I started serving people in another lifetime ago, it feels like, as a therapist. And so I really learned what people need. They need to feel heard. They need to feel valued. They need to feel like their story is important, because our stories are important. All of us, we're all unique. All of our stories are important. And that's why people go to therapy. That's why they want to make behavioral health changes. That's why they pay. Sometimes in the Bay Area, it's like $300 a week for that kind of service. It's quite expensive. And in my career, I saw that working, that through empathy and connection, it could really help people change their lives. And I felt like it was really unfair because $300 an hour is not sustainable for most of the population. So my first company, the Children's Institute, I founded to address that by providing a training program for interns to reduce their caseload and doing sliding scale care directly to patients. And I learned more. I learned, how empathy and understanding, feeling heard, being able to tell your story, and then getting really acute knowledge based on what you're going through to make changes in your life if you want to. It saves people. I saw that interns could do it very effectively, and we help thousands of people in that company. And now my career has led me to using all of that insight and knowledge to training an AI to be empathic and to listen and to really find your story important and to give you tips and recommendations based on knowledge base of an expert that you know and trust. And that's a formula that I've seen work for thousands of people across my career. And I'm excited to democratize that service even further using AI.
Yeah, that's great. And you can tell from the description how much and using the product, it seems like your voice is in the product. And that's one of the things that I think is really interesting about what you're building is that those partnerships that you have with a number of different health and wellness experts. I'd love for you to touch on that, your strategy there, the thought process, and how you think it'll help, kind of Miri stand out in the crowded space.
Well, the experts who we are partnered with today, we've got 15 partnerships around the table. We've got 3 inbound requests I'm reviewing right now, and we've got more people who are emailing us than I've seen before. I'm an expert in that I've helped a lot of people. And I know that when you are mission driven and you want to serve as many people as possible, uh, either you're going to get burnt out because the need is so high and you're still not going to serve everybody, um, or you don't really try and it weighs on you because everyone goes into healthcare in order to help as many people as possible. We see AI as an extension of the knowledge base and care that experts deliver to their patients, but an ability to really scale and amplify in a way that they couldn't before. Um, and Miri is a platform that experts come to because they trust what we're building, they trust us, they see that the coaching experience that we've built is different than a standard question and answer bot. Those are great, and they're really great for when you want to just, ask a question and look for something. But if you really want to feel seen and you want ongoing care by someone who remembers you, the technology needs to be built further. And that's why these experts have come to us to partner with us because they want to help more people and they believe in our mission and how we're accomplishing that.
And that technology point, it seems to be a key element, and I noticed that as well when I've used Miri. The retention is pretty fantastic, and when you're working with the design team, like I mean, I'd love some of the kind of high level thoughts on how you did that and how you iterated that because that's certainly the key, but also potentially really it's a challenge and opportunity, right?
So we have an amazing design lead who used to work at Meta, and he's very innovative. I actually am so excited because next week we are have a whole new launch of a whole new UI, UX product. I know, surprise on the podcast. I didn't tell you about that in advance. We really wanted to meet our customers' needs, so we spent a lot of rounds interviewing and talking to people. What feels relaxed, easy, but also accessible to the knowledge base that you want. And really by centering people and learning what's going to be the most helpful for them, we came up with the designs with our brilliant designer on staff.
No, that's fantastic, and I've had the pleasure of speaking with him and giving some feedback and lots of listening. So I can't wait to see the launch when it comes out in a couple of weeks here. Going to pivot a bit here. One of the things that we talk about a lot on this podcast is the kind of intersection of policy, markets, and innovation. And a lot of the companies we speak to are in very heavy regulated, ecosystems, and there's very tight rails. And think about whether it's hospice or other areas. There's a Medicare fee schedule for a lot of these things, and that kind of governs how much you can innovate, but also creates opportunity. One of the things you mentioned earlier this week on LinkedIn is how the regulation of AI and the bot technology is very much like the Wild West. So as a founder and a CEO, when you're thinking about this paradigm and building something, trying to deliver on that promise, but also, building as landscapes really being formed, how do you think about that? How do you balance that? How do you, build for the long term with an understanding that the landscape may change under your feet in almost in real time, and it could be the state landscape in California, or it could be something coming from Washington D.C. So kind of a big question there, but would love your thoughts on how it is living in the Wild West.
It's there are multiple regulations around AI that are in the works, both state and federal. I think working through that lattice is hard for companies. For startups, you just got to keep a pulse on what's going on. At Miri, what we are doing, we're attempting to mitigate some of that uncertainty about the downside or risks or liability around AI by volunteering. We are subjecting ourselves to the most up-to-date regulatory suggestions. So giving an example of that, California really leads the way. We're aligning with the goals that are being put out by California lawmakers. One example of that I'm thinking of is the recently introduced California AI Transparency Act, which makes sure that users can identify when they're speaking to an AI. So it's really important that people understand this isn't an actual human. It might be based on their knowledge base and they're getting help, but this is AI. And having that confusion is risky, right? So making sure that we're being transparent, that users understand, people understand that it's an AI agent, and being diligent around that is just one example of something that we have a pulse on. It's coming down the pipeline and we're building towards.
That's a really good point, especially considering that the kind of partnership relationships you have and the inbounds you have is that kind of separation. It's fairly clear, I think, but it's a good point, is that between the AI and the expert, that is using your platform to expand their reach, and that's a really good point. You mentioned California, and I think like anytime you talk about policy, there is that push and pull or tension or just back and forth between the state and the federal government. It seems like the federal government's moving a bit slower, and maybe that's probably a good thing. But that state dynamic is really interesting, and that's something that you've seen in Georgia this week. They proposed some legislation on how insurers and docs can use AI. So I think you're right. Having your fingers on the pulse certainly is an important thing to be doing.
And I saw that. It was interesting. I saw that on LinkedIn that you posted that. And what was interesting about that is digital health has not really leaned on diagnostics, but that law actually allowed for some human AI interaction to help and aid with
Mhm.
diagnostics. So in some ways it was regulatory, and in other ways it was kind of opening a door into a new tool, which was interesting for me to see. California does lead the way with data and privacy, and in order to be a trusted brand, it's important for us to align with California. To that extent, we've also brought on a woman who created legislature around data and privacy. Her name's Celine McTaggart. She wrote the laws for Proposition 24, and she's on the Miri
Mhm.
team. And being a brand that our customers can trust is the most important thing, as well as our experts who partner with us. I see a tremendous responsibility in this new era of AI to make sure that we're getting it right for everybody. So, I'd encourage in this Wild West, as you kind of described, if you're building out here, just do right for your customers.
No, that's a good point, and something that most folks you hope would keep top of mind. But sadly, there's probably more high profile examples of that being said but not followed through. But it certainly sounds like that's not the case with you all, given the talent you brought on to help you build that. That's interesting. So when you think about pivoting a bit in the kind of the health and wellness and mental health space, do you see you guys focusing on a specific area in that universe, or it's such a big world that you just want to be as helpful as possible to as many people as possible?
I think my priority is really around information accuracy and transparency. So aggregating and anonymizing the training data, making sure that we're aware of current positions. I think another one that's coming out that's kind of interesting is watermarking as well.
Mm-hmm.
So it's important to us that we're clear to our customers that our chatbots are fueled by AI experts, but there's because it is such a fast-paced moving environment, um, basically just voluntarily complying and understanding sensitivity, and also making sure that you're just as compliant as any other digital health companies out there who have been in the space for a while, um, to make sure that your customers' needs are getting met and you're a trusted platform.
And trust is something that's come up a lot in our conversation today, and I certainly think that's important when we talk about whatever regulatory paradigm emerges. Is that it's that trust, right, and building trust and rapport with policymakers, but also with customers, and that those are always the relationships where companies succeed, is when they have that trust of both and being a good actor. So it's just an interesting common theme that, as I was preparing for this, came up a lot, and we've certainly touched on it a bunch.
Oh my gosh,
Um,
tell me, like and we are a wellness company, right? Like we are in the wellness field, and we are putting ourselves in a place where we are meeting demands and needs across all fronts. We're keeping a pulse on regulatory issues. It's interesting because wellness has, as you know, has a really different kind of law governance than health does. And
mhm.
also, when I was a therapist, this is something I don't talk about very often because I think it's interesting thinking about it as a person by person basis. But I used to always train my clinicians to think, if you are in a court of law, and something terrible has happened, right? And you are subjected to a discussion about what happened, I need you to be able to sit there and say, I did everything I possibly could, for this person. And that's very important to be able to say and to do with honesty and integrity. And in this new life with this, wild, wild west AI build, that's a framework that I hold dear. I think about every single person who comes on the platform, every single expert who partners with us. I want to say with integrity and certainty that I did everything I could. I understood the landscape. I made sure that we were a trusted platform, and that's the best that we can do. And I encourage all other builders, my fellow builders, to be doing the same thing.
That's a great point. Looking at one of the examples that's on the website now, the partnership with Shannon Morris on some of the diet, health, and exercise. You're absolutely right. The tool is there to take her recommendations and her thought on diet, and when you go to recommend, what people are eating to solve, whether it's a gut health issue or general wellness, like that's a big responsibility. And so, as you're designing and developing that, just that you've gone beyond just, here's some advice, something to think about, do some deep breathing to like really, someone's daily life. Like, I just think that's amazing and impressive, but also to your point, a huge responsibility, right? If you're impacting what people are putting in their body, that's pretty impactful for sure.
Totally. And, when I think about all of the millions of people who would never have access to Shannon Morse,
Mhm.
she's an incredible coach. She charges $3,000 for a 12-week program. Um, there's not many people who can afford that, right?
Mhm.
Now through AI, there are millions of people who
Mhm.
can afford that knowledge base. And when I think about people who um, don't know, like she has a very unique program in that she talks a lot about protein and she makes sure that you eat at different intervals in the day. I mean, just working with her, I'm like, I've changed. Like I used to drink like a cup of coffee and just that would sustain me until 1 p.m. And then I would
Right.
eat a large dinner. And she was like, nope, you can't do any of that. And it's been really helpful for me personally. But $3,000 for a 12-week program is just not sustainable for most of us. So um, this goes back to what is good enough, right? Like it is a big responsibility to be talking to people about what they eat, and also without that knowledge base for so many people, there's also risk. There's risk of diabetes, there's risk of obesity, there's risk of depression, there's risk of heart disease. We see Miri as a massive gain for preventative medicine that can impact millions of people who wouldn't access that type of care normally. So it's my duty and diligence to make sure that we're a trusted platform, that we follow laws, that we have self-governance even when it's not out there,
Right.
but that this knowledge can help people. And that's what's really important.
And access is such a good point and something that really, when I talked at the outset about the kind of the promise and the optimism, and I'm an optimistic person by nature of what generative AI and these tools can do, but it's that access, right? If you could provide more access to people, you know, at the very core element, you're saving the healthcare system and the U.S. economy money, but that's a good thing. But ultimately, you're helping more people, and that's really interesting. I wanted to pivot though off the access to talk about. You touched on this very briefly about the difference between kind of wellness and traditional healthcare. As you think about the company in the future, do you see a role for this as part of like employer-sponsored care? Like, how do you kind of see well, go to market is probably not the right term, but as people think about this space, where they're consuming it, sometimes through employers, sometimes individually. How do you think about that dynamic?
Employer sponsors care is interesting because there's a large percentage of Americans that then would have increased access, right,
Mhm.
to our product. There's also a huge amount of folks outside of the workforce who um, also need access to Miri. We believe that by keeping our subscription very low and accessible as a first step, and having the experts we partner with distribute to their audiences. So if you are someone who um, you don't know how to sleep well, say, let's take sleep. You're like, what a
Great
guess,
example.
what a guess. And you follow a really well-renowned sleep expert who gives specific guidelines and tips and, maybe reminds you to put your phone away or to put it in another room when you go to bed, or has their own specific, um, I guess, homework assignments and ways to manage. It'll feel really reassuring to have that companion of that expert around all the time to tell you what to do. And the difference I think with employer benefit space versus which is definitely on the horizon at some point. I think the first step is really making sure that that expert's guidance, if you're following him on YouTube, is now accessible to you in a personalized and ongoing manner. So you hear about it because you follow him, and now he says, check me out on Miri. You can now have access to me. I'll be with you all the time. You're not in it alone anymore, and it's personalized and attuned to you. And from there, after enough people are getting helped in that way, this is my very large dog, Suki. Apologies. She loves coming on podcasts with me.
That
Uh,
is that is that is great. Always welcome.
sorry. Then we'll think about other ways to get the word out to make sure that more people have access to Miri. Um, but our first go-to-market is really through the experts we're partnered with.
Got it. And something we were chatting about ahead of the call is the partnership or relationship you guys have with Ulta Beauty. As part of a go-to-market, we'd love to talk about what that means for you, why that was a priority and kind of what that means for the future.
So young Americans, as we were chatting about with your daughter, as well, I think for a long time when I was growing up too, there was a real disconnect between like appearance and health, right? Like if you put something on your body or on your skin or wear makeup, then you look attractive. And there was kind of a disconnect between our systems and then how we look externally. And now we're looking at things very differently, and consumers know really differently. They know that health is holistic. They know that, health and walking outside and community and what you eat is directly related to your appearance as well. We're one interconnected system. So their consumers know that. They're much smarter than I was when I was their age. And Ulta is looking for a way to serve their needs in the wellness space so that they know that Ulta, which just like any kind of expert, is its own brand that people trust to go to for advice and guidance around wellness needs.
That's great. So how does that partnership, how do you foresee that playing out from a kind of, we'll call it execution perspective, which is terribly business schooly, but how do you see it kind of going from here?
Well, I think the same way that any other product that we create is it starts with the customer. Like, what are their
Mm.
needs? What are they looking for? What's the best way to serve their wellness, um, I guess, interests and what's valuable. So it's a working with an organization who does a great job knowing who their customer is, what's valuable, and how to serve their needs, and then creating a product around that for them.
That's great. Well, thank you. This has been a fantastic conversation. As you know, Amy, you and I could talk for hours and be no shortage of topics. We always like to close on kind of where are you going next, right? You guys last year closed a pre-seed round. Obviously, things are growing fast, but where do you see kind of the next year or so for you guys and the broader future?
So we have 15 experts, like I mentioned, around the table. We are pumping out these products that are for the audiences of each of these experts. We are launching our very first campaign with the new UI UX that I mentioned, with our first influencer. And from there, we'll be swiftly distributing into all the other experts' audiences. After that campaign, I think we will be looking for our next funding round. We also have a few other strategic partnerships with organizations around the table outside of Ulta that I can't mention yet. And I see our technology as being a real vehicle for scaling a trusted organization in wellness or expert in health and wellness to meet the needs and demands of their population in a coaching capacity. So I'm going to keep doing that with the various partners around the table and see where it takes us.
That's fantastic. Again, we were going to end on that word trust, which I feel like is the hallmark of this conversation and a good place to stop. Well, Amy, thank you so much for the time. We very much appreciate it. We look forward to connecting with you soon.
Thanks so much, Tommy. That was fun.